It's cold outside. It's 20 degrees out there. That's why I'm dressed like Timu Tom Wamsgans inside. Hi, welcome. I'm Alex. I make music as Arcade Island. What's the fifth thing? Oh, I just put out an album. It's called Dreaming in the Void. Go listen now. And I'm going through every song on the album, and I'm going to show you how I made it. There's not much more to it than that. Last week, I talked about good deeds. And today I'm talking about hemophilia, which is a rare blood disorder. And if you suffer from that, I am very sorry. That sucks. And I hope you're doing well. But in this case, we're talking about metaphorical hemophilia. When you're demoing music, you gotta have an imagination. I almost didn't put this song on the record because in my imagination, it sounded good, but for 99% of the recording process, the strings and the drums were like these crappy MIDI placeholders that were not satisfying, and they just bothered me the entire time. It was really on the short list to get an ixnayed, along with two other songs, which never made it to the record. When I got to the end and everything was properly recorded, then I was like, oh, there it is. So first piece of advice, if you're writing music and you're like, this demo sucks, think about what it might sound like when everything is recorded. Let's jump right in. Okay, so the intro here is really three components. We have this lead on a MIDI glockenspiel, which sounds pretty good. It sounds kind of like the real thing. And when I was originally messing around with it, it was just this primary lead here. But then I added these harmonies to it, and it became... which isn't something I normally do, create a instrumental harmony for a melody as opposed to just a vocal harmony. There are these chords underneath it, and this is the original MIDI pad that I had from like the internal synthesizer that came with Studio One called Mai Tai. That was really just there as a placeholder, but I ended up keeping it in there. And then I layered on top of that these left and right pads off of my Korg mini log. You'll see that both of these are going to a bus called Korg pad, and that's where I applied some EQ and some delay. So that starts the song off. And then as we get into like the full intro, that melody is then played on three different synth patches off of my Korg mini log here that are playing that melody. So here's the top one. This is the middle one. And this is the bottom one. And all together, they do this. They'll go to this lead synth bus here, where I just did some EQ, some bus compression, and then like some saturation distortion, as well as a little like slap delay reverb. These are still the original strings that I had in here. They sound terrible. Maybe they don't sound terrible to you, but they sound terrible to me. And that's what I was putting up with the whole time I was recording this thing. And I hate MIDI strings. I just do. And when I hear them in a song, there's one song in the history of music that I have heard fake strings in that I actually think it works. And that is Duran Duran's, or Duran, I don't know, I'm not English. Duran Duran's Ordinary World. There is a fake string pad on that I think sounds great. And I don't think I've ever heard another song. I just don't like them. But I'm willing to be proven wrong. I had all of those MIDI recordings, and I set those MIDI recordings to this duet, Jess and Tom from Severn Duo, and they did all the string recordings and sent them back to me. And then this is what it sounds like. Ugh, so much better. And the same thing with the drum beat here. The drum beat here is really one of my favorites on the record in terms of like putting it together. I didn't keep the original MIDI drums, so you can't hear how awful they sounded, but it was literally just one track, just a kick, a snare, and a and a hi-hat. And it just sounded boring. It sounds like this now. The shaker here is actually just a sample. And then we have these snares. As you can guess from previous videos, that is me smacking two 2x4s together, short ones, not giant ones, not 8-foot ones, and comping them together. And then once I had a good sound on 8 to 10 recordings of them, like left and right, getting in the sound that I wanted, I bounced that out as a single track and brought it in just for simplicity's sake, as well as to save on computing power. So that's what that sounds like. The kick, I'm actually smacking a pillow. It's one of those pillows on that couch behind me. I did the same thing that I did for the opening beat on Good Deeds, and I pitched it down. I used submarine to add some sub frequencies back in. I have saturation, distortion, like really cranked up. Like you can hear it without. EQ to really boost what I want to boost and cut what I want to cut. And then I actually threw a limiter on there to really crank it. But like had the limiter set to a slow response time so that the initial transient of the kick sound is allowed to kind of pop through before getting pulled back. Then we got perks here. This is me. It's that Tupperware container again. These two little left and right components are me actually smacking a piece of paper. That was me adding in basically the equivalent of the bottom head of a snare. A snare drum has like your beater head on top, and that's what you hit with a drumstick. And then underneath it, you have these snare wires. And when you hit it, the sound travels through the snare, strikes the resonant head on the other side of the drum, and then causes those snare wires to rattle. And that's what gives that characteristic kind of crackle that you hear in a snare drum. And so, but to simulate that, I just took a piece of paper. This is my 2026 customer rights and responsibilities. This just sounds important. Like that. And that was just to kind of amp up the snare. So here it is together, blended with the snare. The last component was me taking a screwdriver and smacking it against the metal part of this tuning hammer for my piano. A cool beat. Then we have this bass here, which I originally created here as a MIDI bass, and the Mojito plugin here that comes with Studio One. I just did the Formula One preset, but I kind of messed with it a little bit. You know, I got rid of some of the drive that was on it and some of the resonance. It sounded a little bit too weird to me, and I kind of wanted to sit in the background a little bit. It sounds like this. And I just bounced that to another track, again, just to save in computing power. So then we get into the verse. The song basically simplifies down into this. So just bass and part of the percussion. I took the little, I don't know, I guess we'll call this a triangle for now. I'm going to call this perk triangle. There we go. That's what it is. And then for my vocals, you know, for all the verses there, it's really just one main melody that I'm singing. I'm not really doubling it in any way. There's a couple harmonies that come in here. The vocals are all going to this bus over here where I'm adding a ton of saturation, distortion, de-esser. When you distort vocals, especially like a harmonic distortion like saturation, it can really highlight the sibilant character of like your S's and your T's, and it can sound really harsh and not pleasant to listen to. So I really had to double up on the de-esser here and really crank them down. And that just sounds like this.
9 years of age, dreams of tomorrow, soft is my face.
So pretty simple. That's pretty much it. And then we go back into the opening again. And then we go into another verse. And on this one, let's see, I add some pad in here. So those pads from the beginning, I bring them back in. And that glockenspiel plays this little melody here. and really drop down the beat on it too. And this little shaker here that is in the triangle track, I guess I'm being economical, is again me just going like this. I don't know, just a little bit more interesting than something I would pull right out of the box. And there's this little ARP synth here too. And then I put an auto pan on that, which is just setting the signal left and right. And that kind of takes it out of mono and makes it move a little bit. It sounds a little more mysterious that way. And then as we get into the chorus, we have some live components here that kind of replace a lot more of the more sampled or synthesized elements of the first part of the song. And we have some DI bass recorded pretty much the same way as every other song on the record. And then we have these two clean guitars, left and right, that are both being sent to this bus called guitars. And they can be a little bit difficult to hear. And this was a song going back to what I said in the last song about arrangement. There was a little bit too much going on, especially towards the final chorus. And these guitars, I had to pull back a little bit, but they're playing opposing melodies that are kind of syncopated to each other. One is really in time with the song, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And the other one is syncopated, so it's kind of playing the upbeat, if you will, in between each beat. So 1 and 2 and. But you can't really tell unless you're playing it alongside this one. Or here, we'll put the kick in there. And then the drums, same recording setup as pretty much every song. These 4 on the floors are actually pretty hard to play. As you can see, I had to kind of chop them up a little bit, which I'm not exactly proud of, but it was way too distracting. I always see these reels where it's like drummers are like, if you want to impress a non-drummer, and they just play all these like crazy fills and stuff, but if you want to impress a drummer, you just play like a basic 4 on the floor beat in time, because that is like the hardest part. Like the crazier you're playing, it kind of sounds impressive even if it's not as hard as it looks. And then my vocals are stacked here, going to a Vox chorus out. So we have this main melody here.
Hemophilia of my heart.
No harmonies here, but I actually tripled these vocals to really make them pop amongst all of that kind of chaos that's going on.
Hemophilia of my heart.
Do as I say, not as I do. I was really bad on this record about like fading into a lot of these. It's pretty quiet down here, so that didn't come out to bite me. But, you know, in your setup, you can get clicks or pops, or you can just start to hear room noise before something plays, and that can sound kind of nasty. I think the only reason I was kind of careless with it this time is because it wasn't very loud. There's a lot of delay on the main vocal bus here, and that was kind of becoming a problem, like referring to what I said on the last video about mixing and arrangement, and how arrangement and mixing kind of inform decisions, or two sides of the same coin, if you will. When I had that signal being sent pretty much at a uniform level the whole way through this performance, it got a little too out of hand, and those delays were just like taking up frequencies that were being used by other instruments. So for most of the performances in the chorus, I dialed it back, but then I actually brought the bus into like the track listing here so I could do some automation in time. And so I kind of bump up the delay signal at certain phrases in the song.
Hemophilia of my heart, cursed with
right after my heart, you know, there's a little bit of a space here that delay can breathe, right? There's a little bit of room for the delay to stand out. And also helps emphasize the end of each phrase. And then as part of the chorus, the strings come back in. I let that whole thing play out for you because I really like that. It kind of builds. Like there's only 2 elements, then there's a third and a fourth, and it's kind of like rising in frequency. It kind of builds tension. So then we go in right back into the intro again. And there's this thing called other key. I don't know why it's called that, but it's just like a MIDI pad. I'm adjusting the pitch knob on my MIDI controller to just kind of make it glide up and down like that. And it sounds like an air raid siren, kind of. It's a little bit spooky. And then the final verse here, we're just down to bass. That I'm just holding. My vocals.
Here now at last, the line runs behind me.
That ARP again. And then I have these two clean guitars left and right that are just playing pretty static chords. And then as we get to the final chorus, the song kind of modulates, right? It's the same components that were in the first chorus. It's the same chords per se, same vocal melody, the whole shebang. But I'm just adding things in to change it up a little bit. So there's only 2 choruses in the song. I better make them both interesting. That shaker from the beginning comes in. My vocals, again, are still doing that triple stack.
Hemophilia.
But I bring some harmonies in.
Hemophilia of my heart, cursed with hemophilia of my heart.
Similar to Gore, they do overlap here, but again, I just doubled everything up.
It's hemophilia.
I could have just like cut the word short and then sang the next phrase, but one, that's kind of hard to get a breath in, and I don't know, it just kind of robs that last line of power if you're just like trying to get it out of the way before you get to the next line. In a live setting, you know, if I were singing this live, I would need to do that for the most part, but for recording, I don't know, this is like the best it'll ever be per se, so I might as well just go for it. The rhythm here switches up a little bit, so we have the drums sort of playing this almost reggaeton beat. This one was really kind of tough to play. As you can see, I chopped this one up way more than I wanted to. Again, I do like to preserve as much organic character to my recordings as I can. You know, I'm kind of a jack of all trades, but a master of none, in my opinion. I think songwriting is what I'm best at. Performance, I'm okay in most areas. And it does the trick. I'm sure there's some music purists out there that'll be like, oh, that's not a real drum recording because you messed it up. And you can hear some artifacts in there too, especially right there. But I don't know. I think as long as you have that in mind, that you're not just trying to be lazy. I'm not trying to be lazy. I did it a million times and I thought it sounded good. But then as I was recording other components and already took down on my microphones, I was like, it's a little out of time there. So I just fixed it. And it's in the context of the song, you really can't tell. And the bass is kind of playing along with that. So they're talking to each other. And then those same guitars from the first chorus that were kind of playing a more serpentine kind of arpeggiation, this time they're doing a more of like a little bit of a funk thing. And so, I don't know, that whole thing works together so well to me. Just sounds cool. And then the pièce de résistance is the string performances, which do the same as the first. But you'll notice I added there's a really high string that is played on the violin at pretty much like the upper register of the violin. And that's something where it sounded kind of obnoxious when it was played as a MIDI string, and I debated keeping it in there. And I just thought to myself, well, if it doesn't work with real strings, I'll just get rid of it. But when I got those recordings back. I mean, Jess just played it perfectly. It sounds really tragic and like sad. It almost sounds like weeping, and it's perfect. I mean, the song is really about, much like you can't staunch a wound from bleeding, like time just marches on and we're all slaves to it. Like there's nothing any of us can do about it. One day you will die. It's going to happen to every single one of us. As the chorus ends, and then there's just sort of this like outro coda of where I'm just kind of repeating a few lines, these strings are kind of dueling with each other as these solos, and I love them so much. I mean, come on, man. I'm just letting these parts sort of ring.
I am just another star bleeding out. Let me out.
Then we come back to the intro. The only thing different is I added these guitars in. And there she be. This is probably the only song on the record other than Savannah Moon and Common Ancestor, which are supposed to be sort of orchestral and differ from the style from the rest of the songs. These are really the only ones that don't have guitars as sort of the main stars of the show. They're more in the background. It's more of an electronic song. The vibe of this one is just tragic, I guess, is the sort of the sonic characteristic that I would apply to it. So that's it on this one. I hope you learned something. I know I did. Listen to my album. Tell people about it. And that's it. See you next time.